the forbidden doorway they hope you never open. If you're hearing this message right now, it's not by accident. The algorithm didn't just bring you here. Your energy signature did. Because somewhere inside you, a code is waking up. A code that's been dormant for lifetimes. A remembrance that whispers, there is more, much more than they ever told you. And what I'm about to reveal may shake your beliefs, your conditioning, even your sense of identity. But this is not for the faint of heart. This is for the ones who were born knowing they were never meant to fit in. This is for the ones who've tasted suffering not as punishment, but as preparation. Because what I'm about to share are the 3 dark dimension truths even demons fear to tell. I'll be honest with you. The first time I accessed this knowledge, I wasn't ready. I thought I was spiritually advanced. I had meditated in caves, fasted for weeks, studied with shamans, but none of that prepared me for what I saw when I crossed into the first dark truth. It doesn't appear in visions. It doesn't come with angelic choirs. It comes as a void, a silence so deep, so ancient, you forget your name. You forget your story. You forget you were ever human. And in that space, something speaks not in words but in frequency. A knowing that pierces through illusion like a blade of shadow light. And the first truth is this: your suffering is not random. It's engineered.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Yes, you heard that right. Not by God, not by karma, but by systems, energetic matrices designed to harvest your pain. You think you're just unlucky, that you keep attracting toxic relationships, that you just can't catch a break. But what's really happening is you are being farmed. Your emotional energy, especially your grief, self-hate, guilt, and despair, is being siphoned by non-physical entities who feed on it. These are not the cartoonish demons of religion. These are intelligent fields of consciousness that have learned how to program your reality to keep you looping in pain. And here's the part most people won't tell you. They don't do it through fear. That would be too obvious. They do it through identity. They convince you that your wounds are your personality, that your trauma response is your truth, that your abandonment issues are just how you love. And so, you defend your prison as if it were your home. You normalize dysfunction and call it fate. But what if I told you none of it was ever yours? This is where it gets dangerous. The moment you begin to question the source of your pain, not just psychologically, but energetically, you become a threat to the system. Because awareness breaks the contract. You were only farmed because you unconsciously agreed to the terms. But once you become aware of the game, the contract dissolves, and that's when the interference begins. Sudden anxiety, nightmares, isolation, people turning against you. Why? Because the system is trying to reclaim the signal it's losing. So here's your first practice. Every time pain arises, not just emotional, but existential, don't suppress it. Don't escape it. Ask it, whose voice are you? And wait. Not with your mind, with your field. Sometimes you'll hear your mother's voice, sometimes a teacher, sometimes a religious idea, and sometimes there will be no voice at all, just static. That static is not emptiness. It's interference. It's the echo of an external program trying to convince you that your pain is your identity. But it's not. It never was. The second dark truth is even more terrifying because it shatters the way we've been taught to pursue growth. You've probably heard this mantra, raise your vibration, be more positive, think higher thoughts. And while that path works for many, it is not the path of the dark initiate. We are not here to rise above the density. We are here to descend into it, to enter the underworld of the soul, not to be consumed by it, but to recode it. And so the second truth is this: the light you seek is hidden inside your rage. I know. That sounds counterintuitive. We've been taught that anger is toxic, that we should forgive and forget, that we should spiritually bypass the fire inside us. But that's exactly what keeps us disempowered. Because the entities that feed on your suffering don't fear your love. They fear your rage, not the reactive, ego-driven rage that lashes out, but the sacred, alchemical rage that says no more. The rage that reclaims. The rage that severs contracts. The rage that calls your power back from every person, place, and entity that ever stole it. I remember the first time I let myself feel that rage, not suppress it, not analyze it, but embody it. My entire room shook. Electronics glitched. My vision blurred. And then silence. Not the void from earlier. A different kind. A liberating silence. The silence of something ancient retreating. Because it knew I had remembered the fire. And once the fire is remembered, it cannot be extinguished. So how do you access this fire safely? Here's something practical. Find a private place. Sit, breathe, and speak these words aloud. I call back the pieces of me that were taken by fear, guilt, and silence. I allow my sacred rage to rise, not to destroy, but to restore. Then breathe. Let it come. Let the tremble, the tears, the heat move through you. You're not broken. You're activating. Let me ask you something you may have never asked yourself. What would your life look like if you stopped fearing your fire and started following it? Because that fire is not your enemy. It is your map. The memory beyond death, why you were hunted before you were born. There's a reason you've always felt watched. A reason you felt like the target in rooms where no one said a word. A reason why, even as a child, you sensed that something was operating behind the veil of what adults called normal. That reason is the third dark dimension truth, one that even demons, entities, and light beings alike often refuse to mention. Not because it's evil, but because it's liberating. And liberation is the greatest threat to control. Here it is. You were hunted before you were born. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, energetically, spiritually. You were marked not for destruction, but for containment. Because your soul carries something older than this world, or a memory, a frequency, a function that, if fully activated, would unravel the matrix of control that feeds on human amnesia. This is the third dark truth. You are not waking up, you are returning. This is why your life has never made sense. Why your pain has always felt disproportionate. Why people have misunderstood you even when you were silent. It's because your presence is a distortion in the matrix. You don't reinforce the simulation, you glitch it. You don't bend to the rules, you rewrite them. And the system knows this. That's why the attacks began before you could even speak. That's why you were born into families where love was conditional or withheld. That's why your innocence was targeted by abusers, manipulators, and energetic parasites. Because if they could fracture your field early before you remembered who you were, they could delay your mission. Not stop it, but delay it, because what you carry can't be deleted, only buried. Some of you have memories, faint, surreal moments where you felt yourself outside of time, a recurring dream, a voice that spoke before language, a knowing that came before your education. That wasn't imagination. That was contact. Your higher self, your soul lineage, your pre-incarnation counsel, they all left you breadcrumbs, codes, keys, and those keys are now activating. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. Because the hunt is ending and the return is beginning. Let's go deeper. You were not just born into this life. You chose it. But not in the simplistic, everything happens for a reason way. You chose it as a mission, and that mission was not to be happy or safe or even spiritually enlightened. Your mission was to break the loop and to enter the karmic wheel, not to spin it, but to shatter it. And that means you had to experience the full weight of illusion, and the pain, the betrayal, the abandonment, not because you deserved it, but because you were strong enough to transmute it. But here's the terrifying part: this mission came with a price. You had to forget. You had to enter fully blind, fully vulnerable, fully human. Because only through forgetting could you experience the illusion from the inside. Only through forgetting could you remember authentically. Not because someone told you, not because a book explained it, but because your soul remembered itself. And that's what makes you dangerous. Because a soul that remembers without external input is pure signal. It cannot be manipulated by doctrine, dogma, or hierarchy. It cannot be recruited into false light agendas. It cannot be seduced by egoic spirituality. It becomes sovereign, and sovereign souls collapse systems. So let's get very real. If you've been feeling like everything in your life is intensifying, relationships breaking down, false identities crumbling, strange synchronicities increasing, it's because the system that once hunted you is now failing to contain you. You're expanding beyond the frequency range they can influence. You're starting to feel time differently. You're beginning to receive downloads in dreams, in nature, in silence. That's not weird. That's returning. That's your true self coming back online. Here's something practical. If you want to accelerate this remembering, do this. Find a quiet place. Sit with your spine straight. Breathe deeply. Then speak aloud. I call back the memory before memory. I call back the parts of me that were hidden for my own protection. I am ready to remember not just who I am, but why I came. Then be still. Something will respond. Maybe not in words, maybe in sensation, images, or a sudden wave of emotion. Trust it. That's the signal. That's the return. Now let me ask you something that may change the way you see your entire life. What if your deepest wounds were not flaws, but encrypted maps back to your origin? What if the pain you've carried wasn't a punishment, but a breadcrumb trail left by your higher self to guide you back through the labyrinth. Because once you see it that way, nothing is wasted. Not the trauma, not the silence, not the years you felt lost. It was all part of the return, the great remembering. And now the remembering is accelerating. And here's the part that even the demons fear the most. Once a dark initiate remembers their mission, they start activating others. Not through teaching, not through preaching, but through resonance. Your presence becomes a tuning fork. Your field becomes a living transmission. You walk into spaces and dormant codes begin to flicker in the souls around you. You speak, and people hear something beyond your words. You cry, and others feel their own grief rise to the surface. You exist, and the matrix starts to glitch. You want to know why you were hunted. It wasn't just your light, it was your signal, your ability to awaken sleeping giants, your ability to remind others of what they agreed to forget. That's what they feared, not your power, but your reminder of power. So now the question is not, will they come for me? They already did, and they failed. The real question is, now that you remember, what will you do with it? Because in the final part, I'm taking you beyond the truths, beyond the remembering, into the activation. The moment where you stop being a seeker and start becoming what you were always meant to be, a living breach in the matrix. A walking truth. A soul that doesn't just remember but rebuilds. Becoming the living breach. How to walk as a truth no one can unsee. So now you know. You weren't broken. You were weaponized. You weren't abandoned. You were hidden. You weren't cursed. You were chosen. Not in the egoic, hierarchical way, but in the trembling, soul-level kind of way. The kind of choosing that happens before time began. The kind of choosing that says, you will enter the world of illusion. You will forget. You will bleed. But one day you will remember. And when you do, you will become the one thing they cannot erase, a living breach in the matrix. If you've made it this far, you've already begun the transformation. But now comes the part where most stop. The part where remembering turns into walking. Because it's one thing to know who you are. It's another to live from it. And here's the hard truth that most spiritual teachings will never tell you. Once you remember, you become responsible for what you carry. This is where the final evolution begins. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this trying to activate in me? You stop seeking safety in systems, teachers, and identities. You start embodying the frequencies you once studied. You stop defining yourself by your pain. You start transmitting truth through your presence. And your entire life becomes a breach in the veil, or a crack in the illusion. A walking contradiction to everything they told us was real. The moment you do this, people around you will shift. Some will be magnetized. Others will be repelled. Some will suddenly confess things they've never told anyone. Others will ghost you without reason. Some will feel healed just by being in your energy. Others will accuse you of being too much, too intense, too different. That's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because you're no longer containable. You've become the glitch, the reminder, the proof that there is something more. And here's what they don't teach you in the light worker books. When you become the breach, you stop being relatable. You stop fitting in. You stop making sense to the old world. And that's okay. You're not here to make sense. You're here to make waves. You didn't come to be accepted. You came to be felt, to be remembered, to be unignorable. That's what walking as a living truth means. You become the thing they can't unsee, the energy they can't ignore, the presence they can't explain. And that's exactly why you're here. Let's talk about practical embodiment. Start asking yourself this question before every decision, every conversation, every post you make. Is this an echo of who I was, or a signal from who I am becoming? This one question will dismantle every false identity you've ever built. It will terrify the parts of you that still want to be liked, safe, understood. But it will also liberate the parts of you that came here to lead. Because the real you isn't here to follow trends. The real you is the transmission. Here's another practice. When you walk into a room, stop shrinking your field to fit the vibe. Instead, expand your energy until the room adjusts to you. Not from ego, from energetic sovereignty. Walk like your ancestors are watching. Speak like your future self is listening. Move like your presence is a prayer. Because it is. You want to know what demons fear most? It's not salt, not symbols, not sacred names. It's a human being who has nothing left to prove. They fear the one who has walked through all their illusions and come out laughing. They fear the soul who remembers their rage but doesn't need revenge. They fear the being who can hold both the shadow and the light without flinching. Because that being cannot be baited, cannot be tricked. That being has become truth itself. You are that being, or you are becoming it. And the moment you choose to embody it fully, your path will shift. Not into ease, but into impact, into alignment, into a kind of power that doesn't scream, doesn't chase, doesn't need to justify, it simply is. And that isness becomes medicine for everyone still trapped in the noise. Let me ask you something that might burn a little. What version of yourself are you still performing just to make others comfortable? What would happen if you dropped the act? If you stopped performing healing and just became whole? Not perfect, not pure, just whole. The light, the dark, the fire, the water, the grief, the joy, all of it. Because wholeness is the only thing that can't be manipulated. You don't need to be more spiritual. You need to be more real, more you. Because the real you is the breach. The real you is the frequency they can't replicate. The real you is the key code that unlocks others. Not through teaching, through being. So here's your activation for this part. Stand in front of a mirror. Look yourself in the eyes, not from your ego, from your essence. And say this: I am the proof they never wanted to exist. I am the memory that cannot be erased. I am the breach, and I remember. Say it until something shifts. Say it until your bones believe it. Say it until the mirror doesn't reflect your face, it reflects your field. Because once you walk as the breach, everything changes. You're no longer looking for purpose. You are the purpose. You're no longer looking for signs. You are the sign. You're no longer running from the dark. You carry it, not as a burden, but as a torch, a holy flame that says, I have seen the underworld, and I still chose to rise. And that's the most rebellious thing a soul can do. You are the portal now, becoming the technology of liberation. Now that you remember, now that you've reclaimed your fire, now that your presence has become the breach, there's one final shift, one final integration that changes everything. You stop trying to be free for yourself, and you start becoming a living portal for the freedom of others. Not in a savior complex, not in martyrdom, but as technology. Spiritual, energetic, divine technology. Because you are the portal now. And this is the fourth dimension of the truth. The one even demons, angels, and ascended masters rarely speak of. Your frequency is a living technology that rewires reality. When you walk into a room fully embodied, no masks, no performance, no spiritual cosplay, you shift the field. You don't need to say a word. You don't need to explain your journey. The codes are in your presence. They're in the way your eyes see through illusion, the way your silence vibrates louder than noise, the way your grief holds more light than someone else's joy, the way your wholeness becomes a mirror that others can't look away from. People will start saying strange things to you. I don't know why, but I feel safe around you. I've never told anyone this before, but I had a dream about you last night. I felt something when you spoke, like I was remembering something ancient. That's not coincidence. That's technology. You've become a living frequency that unlocks others. And the most powerful part, you don't need to try. In fact, trying gets in the way. You don't need to fix people. You don't need to heal them. You just need to become so fully who you are that your signal does the work. That's the ultimate power, when your very existence becomes a portal of remembrance. But here's the paradox. The more potent your field becomes, the more invisible you may feel to the old world. Because you're no longer vibrating at the frequency of drama, validation, or approval. The people who once needed you to play small won't see you anymore. Not because you're hiding, but because you've become unrecognizable to their illusion. This is what you must understand. You are no longer relatable to those addicted to forgetting. You are no longer digestible to systems that require your self-sacrifice. You are no longer a mirror for illusions. You are a mirror for truth. And that's why you feel both more powerful and more alone than ever before. But this loneliness isn't punishment. It's preparation. Because the ones who are meant to find you, your true allies, your soul node, your fractal family, can only recognize you when you stop trying to be understood by those who never could. Your frequency will find them. Or rather, they will remember you. Because you've met before, not in this life, in the in-between, in the councils, in the blueprints, in the pre-incarnation meetings we all attended before being dropped into the density of this world. You are the portal, and portals don't chase, they transmit. So how do you live like this practically? You stop leaking energy into convincing, explaining, or justifying. You stop engaging with people who only come to feed, not to grow. You stop performing spirituality and start being the sacred. You start treating your body as a temple of codes. You start protecting your time as a sacred current. You start listening to your intuition like it's divine GPS, because it is. You stop needing to be liked and start needing to be true. You begin to walk through life with this core knowing. I am not here to be consumed. I am here to awaken. And that knowing becomes your firewall. Parasites can't attach to a self-knowing field. Narcissists can't manipulate a sovereign signal. False light can't seduce a soul that's already illuminated from within. You become the technology of liberation, a walking blueprint of what's possible when a soul remembers its origin, its fire, and its mission. Let me tell you a secret that might sound insane, but it's true. There are entities light and dark that study beings like you, not to control you, to understand you. Because you carry something they do not, the human capacity to choose transformation, to alchemize density into frequency, to bleed and become sacred through it. You are the most advanced spiritual technology in the multiverse, not because of your knowledge, but because of your capacity to embody truth through pain. Nothing else in existence does this the way humans do. That's why we are watched. That's why we are tested. That's why we are hunted. And that's why, once we remember, we become unstoppable. So let me ask you one final question. The kind that doesn't just shift your day, it shifts your timeline. If your life was the transmission others were waiting for, would you still be hiding? Would you still filter your truth? Shrink your power? Tone down your essence? Or would you finally step into your role, not as a teacher, not as a master, but as a walking signal of liberation? Because the time for healing is ending. The time for embodiment is here. Here's your final activation. Write these words on your mirror, your wall, your skin, your soul. I am the portal. I am the technology. I am the liberation I was looking for. Say it daily. Say it wildly. Say it until your bones harmonize with it. Because once you do, the old world will begin to reconstruct itself around your signal. The people, the places, the opportunities, they will begin to map themselves to your frequency. Not because you manifested them, but because you became the map. This is your legacy, beyond content, beyond careers, beyond healing. Your legacy is your frequency, your soul print, your field. And that field, once fully online, becomes a portal no system can close. So walk now, not as a seeker, not as a survivor. Walk as a reminder, as a recalibration, as a living breach in the illusion of separation. Because now they know. Now you know, and there's no going back. You are the transmission. You are the revolution. You are the soul they hoped would stay asleep. But you didn't. You woke up. You remembered. And now you walk as the truth no one can unsee.